Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia, his first bilateral visit in the third term, a short trip, but with a lot of boxes to tick and significant timing. Putin is hosting Modi, leader of the world's biggest democracy, at the same time as NATO leaders are meeting for a summit in Washington. So for Moscow, this visit is a message to the West. But what is it for New Delhi? What does India hope to achieve? We'll discuss that tonight. In France, a shock election result. The left has won and Paris is looking at political deadlock. Emmanuel Macron remains president, but he will have to deal with a lot of chaos. In Iran, a significant verdict in the presidential poll. A reformist has won. But will he be able to reform his country? We'll tell you about the new leader. In the South China Sea, Beijing has docked a monster ship to bully the Philippines. In Barcelona, anti-tourist protests as locals fire water pistols at visitors. In India, the infrastructure is crumbling again with the rains. This is not how you become a superpower. In Africa, coup-hit countries are ditching the regional bloc called ECOWAS. In the US, Joe Biden says only the Lord can make him quit the presidential race. The Earth's core is moving in reverse. What does it mean for all of us? And what is doom scrolling? How can you reclaim your brain? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Terror strikes Jammu and Kashmir again. Terrorists ambush an Indian Army truck in Kathua district. At least 4 soldiers killed and 6 injured. This is the second attack on the army in the region in the last 48 hours. Yesterday, 6 terrorists were killed in 2 separate encounters in the Kulgam district. Russia fires dozens of missiles at cities across Ukraine. 1 missile struck a children's hospital in Kiev. At least 24 people have been killed in the attacks. The strikes came as the Ukrainian president began his Poland visit. Next, Zelensky will travel to the US for the NATO summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping meets Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Beijing. Orban has branded his trip a quote-unquote peace mission 3.0. This follows his surprise visits to Russia and Ukraine last week. At the beginning of July, Hungary took over the European Union's rotating presidency. Kenya's starvation cult leader goes on trial on terrorism charges. The self-proclaimed pastor was arrested in April last year. He allegedly incited his followers to starve to death to meet Jesus. More than 400 people died in one of the world's worst cult-related massacres. Bangladesh battles flood fury, at least 8 people killed and more than 2 million affected. Heavy rains cause major rivers to burst their banks. Bangladesh is crisscrossed by hundreds of rivers and floods have been more frequent in recent decades. And 3 female athletes will represent Afghanistan at the Paris Olympics, but the Taliban government refuses to recognize them. The International Olympic Committee has invited a squad of 6 Afghan athletes. All 3 of the women athletes live outside Afghanistan. Prime Minister Modi is in Moscow. He landed this afternoon for the first bilateral visit of his third term, and Russia is pulling out all the stops to welcome him. He got a red carpet welcome. Prime Minister Modi was received by Denis Manturov, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, the same man who had received Xi Jinping last year when the Chinese president landed in Russia for a state visit. And this is a signal from Moscow. It is giving India the same importance as China. In a few moments, the Indian leader will meet Russian President Vladimir Putin over dinner. Now, this is a short trip. Modi will spend just 26 hours in Russia, and yet it's significant, especially because of the timing. It coincides with the NATO summit in America. So tomorrow, when Modi and Putin sit down for bilateral talks, NATO leaders will be meeting in Washington, D.C. And the Kremlin has been quick to point this out. It says the West is quote-unquote jealous of Prime Minister Modi's visit. Now, we don't know about jealous, but the West will certainly be watching. The NATO did all they could to isolate Russia, and yet Russia remains close to the world's largest democracy, India. Its GDP is growing faster than Western powers, and it's nowhere close to losing the war in Ukraine, despite all the military support that the West has been giving Kiev. So in terms of messaging, Modi's visit to Moscow is quite significant. Before taking off from New Delhi, he issued a statement calling Putin his friend. Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "I look forward to reviewing all aspects of bilateral cooperation with my friend President Vladimir Putin and sharing perspectives on various regional and global issues." And Moscow has left no stone unturned to welcome him. The Russian president is adding a personal touch. He's hosting Prime Minister Modi for dinner, not at the Kremlin, but at his dacha. Now, dacha is the Russian term for an estate. Putin's dacha is right outside Moscow in a suburb called Novo Ogaryovo. That's where they'll have dinner tonight. It's an opportunity to talk to each other informally, to iron out any issues before the bilateral tomorrow. They also get a chance to talk privately over dinner and have a frank exchange of opinions on pressing issues. So this dinner will set the tone for the bilateral tomorrow. They in fact did the same in 2021 when Putin visited India. Prime Minister Modi had hosted him for dinner before the formal talks. So in a way, Putin is reciprocating the gesture. Tomorrow, Prime Minister Modi has a packed schedule. He will attend a reception and meet members of the Indian community in Russia. Then he'll visit the tomb of the unknown soldier. Now, this is a war memorial dedicated to Soviet soldiers, those who died during the Second World War. From here, Prime Minister Modi will head to an exhibition organized by Rosatom. That's Russia's civilian nuclear power conglomerate. Putin is expected to join Prime Minister Modi there, and after this, they will have bilateral talks at the Kremlin. That's the last engagement of the day, of Tuesday. And then on Tuesday evening, Modi will depart for Austria for the second and final leg of this visit. But let's focus on Russia for the moment. Why has Prime Minister Modi gone to Russia today? He's gone for the annual summit. India and Russia have had this for over 2 decades now. The leaders take turns visiting each other every year. Putin came the last time in 2021, and now Modi has gone. By the way, Modi went for such a summit in 2001 as well as the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India then. Putin was still the President of Russia. But coming back to the present, what will Modi and Putin discuss? 4 broad topics: trade, connectivity, energy and defense. They'll also try to resolve some challenges like the rupee-ruble trade. This mechanism was started 2 years ago. Due to Western sanctions, Russia was barred from the global banking network. So India and Russia started using their native currencies to settle import bills. India uses the rupee, Russia uses the ruble. It's a good way to continue trading with each other and bypass Western sanctions. But here's the flip side. While India buys lots of oil from Russia, Russia does not import a lot from India. And now it has a stockpile of Indian rupees, but nowhere to spend it. At one point, Russia had some 8 billion rupees in Indian banks. They'll have to find a way to fix this imbalance. So that is one challenge. The 2 sides are expected to expand their energy relationship through long-term contracts, where India commits to buying more oil and gas from Russia and securing supplies for the long term at competitive prices. This would help both sides. We'll see how much progress they can make here. The top focus of the talks will be defense. Russia is still India's biggest defense supplier. 60% of India's military equipment comes from there. So India cannot afford to alienate Russia, especially with the mounting security challenges on the border with China. New Delhi has 2 clear priorities here: pending deliveries and new contracts. That's what the Indian leader will focus on: pending deliveries and new contracts. Some of the Russian deliveries are running late, like the S-400 missile defense system. India wants to speed it up. The other challenge is that China is getting closer to Russia. So will this hurt India's defense relationship with Russia? New Delhi has to ensure that it doesn't. So they're looking at a defense pact. something that Moscow cleared last month. A defense logistics agreement that could be signed tomorrow. We don't have the details yet, but reports say this pact could enhance interoperability between the two militaries, Indian and Russian. There is also a small irritant which both sides are expected to address, and that is the recruitment of Indian citizens by the Russian military. Around 40 of them, 40 Indians, are still believed to be in Russia. New Delhi is seeking their prompt release. So a lot on the agenda. I expect significant outcomes from this brief visit. The messaging, like we said, is quite clear. Russia is still an important partner for India, and that is not changing anytime soon. It has all the makings of a high-pitched drama, a risky gamble, an embattled protagonist, plot twists, and an unexpected climax. On Sunday, France woke up to the results of its parliamentary elections. And needless to say, it was a shocker. Newspapers were ready to print a win for the far right. Instead, it's the left that got the first place. So while Emmanuel Macron is still the president, France has got a new parliament and their political landscape has transformed significantly. Now, quick primer first. In June, the European Parliament held its elections. The French far right made huge gains there. It left the French president uneasy. So President Emmanuel Macron saw it as a blow. He dissolved the parliament. He called for elections. In the first round, the far right came on top. But no party had a majority, so they had to go for a second round. That happened yesterday. The far right was expected to make more gains, but they ended up coming third. The maximum number of seats went to the left. And in second place were Macron's centrists.
Our opponents seem to be thinking they have already won. But there was this real upsurge throughout the country, which still shows that there are forces that are able to mobilize. The turnout increased, and so we won. It is a very good thing.
Relieved. Terribly relieved. I tell myself the French people have responded. We couldn't let the national rally win. This is not France. This is not the France of enlightenment. It's not the France of liberty, equality, fraternity.
So how did it happen? And what does this result mean for France? Let's look at the top 5 highlights. Number 1, it's a huge victory for the left. They were fighting under the new Popular Front. The left parties had come together as the Popular Front. It's a coalition of 4 main parties: the France Unbarred Movement, the Socialists, the Greens, and the Communists. It's quite a diverse bunch. Now, these parties do not have a lot in common. They differ in ideologies. They've had disagreements. But this time they came together to keep Marine Le Pen's national rally out of government.
This evening, the national rally is far from having the absolute majority the commentators predicted scarcely a week ago. In fact, it's totally the opposite. It's an immense relief for an overwhelming majority of people in our country.
Which brings us to highlight number 2. Who will become the Prime Minister? Usually the president names a Prime Minister from the biggest faction. In this case, the biggest faction is the new Popular Front, that is the leftists. The alliance says it will put forward a candidate by next week. But it won't be without disagreements. Currently, a lot of names are doing the rounds, but one of them stands out, and that is Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He heads the far left, France Unbowed. He is a well-known figure in French politics, but if there's one thing that he is not known for, it is compromises. He is a divisive figure. And for a coalition to function smoothly, you need consensus, not division. Other names in the race include Marine Tondelier from the Green Party, the Socialist Party's current head, Olivier Faure, and the Communist Fabien Roussel. Another unlikely contender is François Hollande, the former French president. So there's no consensus on who the prime ministerial candidate will be, and France is in a political mess. That's highlight number 3. France is staring at a hung parliament. The left may have won, but they do not have majority. France's National Assembly has 577 seats. No group, no alliance has got 200 seats. The left-wing coalition has 187 seats. Macron's Ensemble Alliance have 159 seats. And the far-right National Rally and its allies have 142 seats. So no one has enough seats to govern. If the parties cannot cobble up a majority, there will be chaos. We saw some of it on Sunday. There were clashes on the streets. If a government is not formed soon, it could get worse. Highlight number 4. What happens to the far right? The National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, they had won the first round. They expected to win this one too, but that did not happen. Party President Jordan Bardella slammed the results. He condemned what he called the unnatural alliance.
By deciding to deliberately paralyze our institutions, Emmanuel Macron has not pushed the country towards uncertainty and instability. As a result, he has deprived the French people of any response to their day-to-day difficulties for many months to come.
It's not game over for Marine Le Pen's party, though. In the last parliament, they had 88 seats. This time, they have 140 seats. So the party has made significant gains. They may still be out of power, but they're much stronger now with 140 seats. And this result could set the tone for the next presidential election, even though it's slated for 2027.
We're losing one more year of unregulated immigration, one more year of losing purchasing power, one more year of a blowing up of insecurity in our country. But if we need to go through that, then we'll go through that.
This brings us to the man responsible for the mess, Emmanuel Macron. That's highlight number 5. Macron took a gamble when he announced the polls. It was a snap election, remember? Until last week, it looked like it had backfired badly. But the president has now made a comeback. His party, the centrists, are in second place. The far right are out of power. So Macron may not have won, but he hasn't lost as much as was feared. And the road ahead will be tough for him. Macron, like I said, remains president of France. But with the parliament as divided as this, there will be political deadlock. And all eyes are on the president. He cast the die that led to this mess. So now he must clean it up. Let's look at another election now, the one that took place on Friday in Iran. The results are out, and the winner is this man, Masoud Pezeshkian.
Congratulations to the knowledgeable and dear people of Iran on their victory. You have completed the work and taken a great step forward.
A great leap forward. That is what Pezeshkian said. It implies that things will change. But is that really the case? Iran was forced to hold elections this year because their former president, Ibrahim Raisi, died in a helicopter crash. It happened in the month of May. So Iran had to choose his replacement. 6 candidates were allowed to run for president, Pezeshkian and 5 others. The first round of polling took place on the 30th of June. 2 candidates advanced to the runoff. One moderate, Masoud Pezeshkian, and one hardliner, Saeed Jalili. The second round of polls took place on Friday. Pezeshkian beat Jalili. The moderate won, the hardliner lost. Now remember, the former president Raisi was a hardliner, so this result is a major shift. There is a feeling of change in Iran. Listen to some of the voters.
Everyone is a bit more glad. They have a good feeling, a little bit. In the past few days, they didn't feel good, but as soon as people heard Pezeshkian had won, a small smile was on their face. Nobody swore or said bad words today.
We are very happy that Mr. Pezeshkian won. I expected him to become the president because we really needed a literate president to solve the economic problems of the people.
Well, Pezeshkian is more than literate. He is a trained heart surgeon who even served as the head of a medical university. His expertise had caught the eye of a previous Iranian government. Pezeshkian served as Iran's health minister between 2001 and 2005. So he has government experience as well. But this is not the only reason why Iranians voted for him. It was also his moderate tag, his promise to try and improve relations with the world and get the West to rescind sanctions. Now remember, Pezeshkian is not some idealistic reformer. He's not there to change the system in Iran. He couldn't do it even if he wanted to, because the president of Iran is a secondary figure. The real power in the country lies with the supreme leader, and that is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei controls foreign policy, the reason behind the Western sanctions. Iran is accused of trying to develop nuclear weapons. It is also blamed for trying to destroy Israel with a number of militias in other countries, Iranian proxies. And this is why there are sanctions on Iran. All of these things are under Khamenei's control, so Pezeshkian will not be able to change them even as president. The most that he can do is appeal to Khamenei. He can request Iran's supreme leader to take a softer stance. That's about it. And Pezeshkian knows the limits of his powers.
The elections went smoothly and ultimately the votes were counted correctly. First, we should thank the supreme leader. If he wasn't there, I don't think we would have been announced winners of the elections easily. It's been many years after the revolution that we come to the podium, we make promises and we fail to fulfill them. This is the biggest problem we have in your eyes. In this election, I didn't give you false promises. I did not say things that I couldn't do afterwards. I didn't lie.
He says he will try and improve foreign relations. He will try and get sanctions removed. Try is the key word here. Pezeshkian also wants Iran's mandatory hijab law to be relaxed. He wants to remove some restrictions on internet access, and he wants to improve conditions for Iran's minorities. He hasn't promised an overhaul, just incremental changes which may help ease the lives of the Iranian people. And even this moderate agenda may face pushback. But Pezeshkian will be ready for that. He intends to abide by Iran's existing framework, and that may be his greatest strength. Iran's reformer presidents have come and gone. They did not really manage to make any long-term dent. So maybe Pezeshkian's middle ground approach is the need of the hour. We'll see in the next few months if it bears fruit. Meanwhile, tensions in the South China Sea are escalating. Beijing is making new threats. This time it has sent what's being called a monster to intimidate Manila. Let me show you what we're talking about. The monster is a Chinese Coast Guard ship. It is the world's largest Coast Guard vessel. At 165 meters, this ship is bigger than a football field. China has two such ships. On the 3rd of July, Beijing sent one of them to the Spratly Islands in the contested South China Sea. This ship has anchored inside Manila's exclusive economic zone. It is near the Sabina Shoal, barely 800 yards from a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Now, technically, this is the territory of the Philippines, their zone. So when Manila saw the Chinese ship, it responded swiftly. Take a look at this.
Coast Guard vessel 5901 within the vicinity waters of Sabina Shoal. This is Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Teresa Magbanwa, MRRV 9701. You are sailing within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. What is your intention? Over.
That was the Philippine Coast Guard. It tried to warn the Chinese Coast Guard, those officers on board this massive ship. They tried to inquire about their intentions and their purpose, but the Chinese vessel did not move an inch. Manila says these are quote-unquote intimidation tactics. For months now, China has been doing this, trying to bully the Philippines in these waters. There have been multiple run-ins. The Chinese Coast Guard has chased Filipino ships. It has rammed into them. It has targeted them with water cannons. Last month, there were clashes. The Chinese showed up with sticks, knives and axes. We covered all of it on the show. Do you see those men, in fact, behaving like pirates in these pictures? That's the Chinese Coast Guard. And this is clear bullying. And Beijing has decided to take it a notch up now. Today, it challenged Manila's rights over these waters.
Sabina Shoal is part of China's Spratly Islands and is not in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. Chinese military and Coast Guard vessels patrolling and enforcing the law on the waters near Sabina Shoal comply with China's domestic law and international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
The Sabina Shoal and the Spratly Islands, they're both part of the South China Sea. They fall within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia and Brunei are also parties to this dispute. They have similar claims in the region, but China refuses to recognize any of them. China claims almost 90% of the South China Sea, and it is now using force to enforce its claims. So what should the Philippines do? What options does it have against a bully like China? Beijing understands only the language of strength, so Manila needs to develop deterrence. Today, it took a step in that direction. The Philippines signed a defense pact with Japan. There was a ceremony in Manila. The Japanese foreign minister is visiting, and the pact they've signed will be significant for the region. Under this agreement, Japanese forces can deploy in the Philippines and vice versa. Both sides can conduct joint training exercises. Both these countries have been at the receiving end of China's expansionism. In the past, Tokyo has condemned Beijing for its aggression in the South China Sea. Today, after the pact was signed, the Japanese foreign minister had a message for China.
Issues surrounding the South China Sea are a matter of legitimate concern to the international community that is directly linked to peace and stability in the region. Japan strongly opposes any attempt by force to unilaterally change the status quo in the South China Sea, or any act that increases tensions.
Japan is the latest ally in Manila's growing list of security partners. They have similar deals with the US, Australia and Britain. The Philippines is in talks with France as well. Now, if you join the dots, this is what it looks like. A larger Western alliance is taking shape against China, and the Philippines is emerging as a key defender against Chinese aggression in the region. A summer afternoon on the streets of Barcelona. Who wouldn't like that? Well, think again. On Sunday, tourists in Barcelona were in for a shock. They were hit by water, sprayed by the city's unhappy residents. These residents were protesting against over-tourism, and this battle is not unique to Barcelona. Across the world, locals have a grudge against tourists. They want them out. But what is the solution? If you're preparing to travel this summer, this next report is a must-watch for you.
Nestled between the Mediterranean and the mountains is Barcelona. Any Spanish itinerary is incomplete without a trip to the city. But while you visit Gaudi's creations or sit down for tapas, beware of one thing: the city's unhappy locals. On Sunday, Barcelona's tourists were in for a rude shock. They were sitting down for some food, and that's when they were sprayed with water. These are Barcelona's anti-tourist protesters. They marched down the city, they took over tourist areas armed with their water pistols. Most of them had one demand: a decrease in tourism.
We come here to demonstrate against mass touristification here in Barcelona. The last years, the city has turned completely for tourists, and what we want is a city for citizens and not in service of tourists.
Restoration and hotels is the group that makes really big money, but all the people are in a very poor situation and they don't have enough money to live. That's a problem.
In 2023, Barcelona had at least 26 million visitors. Together, they generated over $13 billion. So tourism is crucial for the economy. But it also puts immense pressure on the infrastructure and inconveniences the locals. Public services are burdened, housing prices are skyrocketing, and the profits from tourism never reach the public.
The first is against the economic model based on mass tourism because this model makes us poorer and more dependent. And on the other hand, it has an effect on the price of housing, which right now is an alarming and distressing problem for the population.
And Barcelona is not alone in this. In April, tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Canary Islands. They slammed the government. They raised slogans, all against tourists. The residents believe that the island's tourism model is unsustainable. The protesters said they were not against the tourists. Instead, they wanted it to be more beneficial for residents. And this isn't just a Spanish phenomenon. Over-tourism is a complaint across the world. Cities are tired of tourists. They want them to stay away. And they're imposing all sorts of measures. Milan is banning pizzas and ice cream at night. Venice is charging tourists to enter the city. Amsterdam is saying no to new hotels. Iceland has reinstated its tourism tax. Mount Fuji's new entrance fee aims to manage crowds. So clearly, tourist hotspots have had enough. But will these help? Global tourism is at a record high. This year, it's set to reach pre-pandemic levels. Travel will add a record $11 trillion to the global economy in 2024. According to the World Tourism Organization, the number of international tourists will surpass 2 billion by 2030. So tourists aren't going anywhere, yet the places they want to visit remain the same. This is straining resources, and local residents are left bearing the brunt, which is why governments must spring into action. Tourism is important for the economy, but it cannot go on unchecked. For sustainable tourism, the focus should be on responsible travel.
Our next story is from India, the world's fifth largest economy, a country vying for superpower status and its rightful place at the United Nations Security Council. There is no denying that India deserves all of this and more. But sometimes the country really doesn't make the best case for itself. Take a look at some of these visuals. These are images from Mumbai, India's financial capital and one of the most expensive cities in Asia. This was the state of Mumbai today. It looks less like a city and more like a wastewater treatment tank before the treatment process begins. About 300 millimeters of rainfall hit the city this morning over a span of 6 hours from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. and this was the result. 50 flights were cancelled, schools were shut, people were advised to stay home and local trains, the lifeline of Mumbai, faced delays and cancellations. Again, this is India's financial capital, brought to its knees because of the monsoon. And no, this is not some once-in-a-lifetime storm. This is just the beginning of the Mumbai monsoon, the same monsoon that hits the city every single year. So then the question is, why does this keep happening? Why does Mumbai continue to drown in muddy water year after year? And it's not just Mumbai. 2 weeks ago, it happened in Delhi, India's national capital, the political heart of the country. On the 28th of June, the Delhi airport's roof collapsed, killing one person. This was a recently renovated airport expanded at a cost of 8,000 crore rupees. That's almost $1 billion. Is this what $1 billion of taxpayer money buys you in India? There was a lot of finger pointing after this incident about how the airport was built over a decade ago by the previous government. But isn't it the current government's job to maintain the infrastructure they inherit? After all, you aren't only responsible for the things that you have built, you have to maintain everything, no matter who built it and when. That's the maintenance part of things, which both Delhi and Mumbai are clearly doing wrong. But almost nothing compares to Bihar and the state's beleaguered bridges. 12 bridges have collapsed in Bihar over the last month. That's right, 12 bridges. It started on the 18th of June in Araria. And then the dominoes started falling one after the other. Siwan, East Champaran, Kishanganj, Madhubani, the rains kept coming and the bridges kept falling. And once again, Indian taxpayer money sank along with the questionable concrete in the bridges. Bihar has faced heavy rains over the last few weeks. But the bridge collapse phenomenon predates this. There was a collapse in March this year. That bridge cost about $120 million. Last year, we saw a $200 million bridge collapse for the second time. This is the state of Indian infrastructure. Roads turn into rivers, airports crumble and bridges collapse. Which brings me to the question, how does India expect to become a superpower at this rate? To become a developed nation, to attract foreign investment, India needs to get the basics right. Roads are basic infrastructure. So are bridges and flyovers and airports. Anyone looking to invest in your country will judge you on the basics, and India leaves much to be desired on this front. Throughout the decades, that has been the case. At present, countries are looking to de-risk from China. They're searching for alternatives. India should be an obvious choice. But the house isn't in order. And that is why India is facing competition from the likes of Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand. India has an abundance of manpower and talent, but dilapidated infrastructure. That is partly why Southeast Asian countries are winning over multinationals. All the countries I mentioned are also tropical, by the way. We all face monsoons, but Southeast Asia seems to have learned how to deal with the rains, and India is still playing catch up. India's rain record won't sink the country, but it will hold us back if we really want to progress at the global stage. We need to demand more from every level of government, because without accountability, we'll keep counting the broken bridges and the shattered airports until the end of time. Now let's turn to West Africa. There's an economic union in that part of the world. It's called the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. Now, ECOWAS held a meeting yesterday in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, and they were in panic mode because the 50-year-old group faces disintegration thanks to 3 former members: Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso. All 3 countries are run by military juntas, and they have decided to reject ECOWAS. Instead, they formed their own alliance. It's called the Alliance of the Sahel States. This new bloc was formalized on Saturday, and it has the potential to destroy decades of West African integration. Here's our report.
What would you do if you and your friends weren't invited to a party? Probably host a better one, right? It seems 3 West African countries were thinking along these lines when they held a summit on Saturday. The leaders of Mali and Burkina Faso traveled to Niger's capital, Niamey, for an official meeting of their very own regional alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States. These countries had touted this alliance a few months ago, But on Saturday, they officially signed a confederation treaty and took some shots at West Africa's biggest regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS.
Our people have turned their backs irrevocably on ECOWAS, and now it's up to us to create the Alliance of Sahel States Confederation, an alternative to any artificial regional grouping, by building a sovereign community of peoples.
ECOWAS has existed since 1975. It was a grouping of 15 West African countries. Now, that number has gone down to 12. ECOWAS had planned to talk about bringing the Sahel states back into the fold, but the Sahel Alliance came as a shock.
It is clear that disintegration will not only disrupt people's freedom of movement and settlement, but will also worsen insecurity in the region.
The ECOWAS Commission President tried to make a case for the grouping. Over the last half-century, the nations have tried to work together. ECOWAS has put a common market in place in West Africa. People have been able to move and settle across ECOWAS countries without too much difficulty. The bloc is funding development projects in some of the poorer countries, including Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, the three nations that have opted out. And ECOWAS says it has been working on countering terrorism, which is something the Sahel states will refute.
I remain convinced that in the current geopolitical context, AES remains the only sub-regional grouping that is efficient in the domain of counterterrorism, as ECOWAS has been particularly lacking in involvement in this fight.
The Sahel State Alliance was born in response to rampant terrorism. All three nations, Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, have been dealing with terrorist insurgencies for years. The local militaries were fighting terrorists with the help of the West. Countries like France and the US. But after years of fighting, there seemed to be no end in sight. And the militaries of these three West African countries got fed up. The soldiers overthrew their democratically elected governments and formed military juntas to rule these nations instead. The juntas blame the West for the situation in their countries, and they also blame ECOWAS for not doing enough. It seems ECOWAS has finally gotten the message. In Sunday's meeting, the group approved a new counter-terrorism force. It will be 5,000 strong. ECOWAS is also planning to roll out a common currency, the ECO, to better integrate the West African economies. These are much-needed initiatives and have great potential. But will they be enough to convince the Sahel states to return? Or is it too little, too late?
What do you look for in a world leader? Good morals, leadership, perhaps agility? Well, ask America and they will tell you that all they want is a coherent president. Joe Biden is 81 years old. He is the candidate of the Democratic Party. This November, he will go up against Donald Trump. And it doesn't look like an easy contest. Biden is fumbling his way through speeches. He's losing donors. The Democrats want him to step down, but the president remains defiant.
I convinced myself of two things. I'm the most qualified person to beat him, and I know how to get things done.
If you can be convinced that you cannot defeat Donald Trump, will you stand down?
It depends if the Lord Almighty comes down and tells me that, I might do that.
Only the Lord can make him quit. That's what Joe Biden says, but his party doesn't share those same emotions. Senior Democrats want him to step aside. They have told this to him on a phone call. Reports suggest they were quite explicit about it, that he must go. And while this is happening in private, Democratic donors are making their displeasure public. They're pulling funding. Take Abigail Disney. She is an heiress to the Disney family fortune, and she says that she will withhold donations if Biden does not step down. Other prominent donors also threaten the same. And this can be a game changer because the US elections are all about money. You could argue that all elections are, but this one is especially so. You need funds to campaign, to mobilize voters, to hold rallies. Without funding, campaigning is difficult. And Joe Biden knows that. He's been in the game long enough, yet he refuses to step down. Instead, he's cracking jokes about it.
Folks, I know with every fiber of my being, I know I'm going to look like I'm 40 years old, but I've been around a little bit. I got my glasses in. Well, I tell you what, Dark Brandon's coming back. He's here. And guess what? The next 120 some days or so, they're going to get a real good look at who Donald Trump is. Folks, with your permission, I'm going to find out whether you have any ice cream. You know, isn't it really dull when you have a president who's known for two things, Ray-Ban sunglasses and chocolate chip ice cream?
Biden is trying to keep the mood light, but even he can't avoid the elephant in the room, and that is his age. Watch this.
At the cross, where I first saw the light and the burdens of my heart.
That was Biden sitting in a trance at a church. Is this man fit enough to lead the Democrats? Well, he certainly thinks so himself. Today, the US president wrote a letter to Democrats, a letter of reassurance, where two things stand out. Biden says that he's running the race till the end and that he's committed to beating Donald Trump. So he thinks that he's the best candidate for the Democrats. But do the polls say the same? Let's look at a CNN poll. It looks at a Biden-Trump matchup. 49% support for Trump, 43% for Biden. So Trump is leading by 6 points here. Now let's look at another poll. It looks at a potential Kamala Harris-Donald Trump matchup. What if they were to contest against each other? 43% back Trump, 42% support Kamala Harris. So it is a near tie, which makes Biden's argument fall flat. He says that he is the only one that can beat Trump, but polls show that his vice president can do better than him. So can he be replaced? There are 119 days till the election, and these are the possible scenarios. The first scenario is this, that Biden steps aside himself, which is unlikely. But if the pressure grows, the US president may do it. And if that happens, it should be relatively easy because then there'll be a Democratic National Convention. Delegates will choose a nominee. The top candidates at this point include Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Whoever has more delegates becomes the Democratic nominee. Which brings us to scenario number 2. Biden doesn't want to quit. What happens then? Can he be forced out? Well, it is difficult. It has never happened before in US politics, and the Democrats will have to use a lot of loopholes. Party delegates will have to revolt against Biden to force him to step aside, and then they will have to choose a new nominee. Again, it sounds highly unlikely. So unless there's some sort of a miracle, it will most probably be a Trump-Biden matchup in the US presidential election, and America is not very enthusiastic about it. Look at this comment by Lindsey Graham. He's the senator of South Carolina. Graham says both candidates should take tests, both physical and cognitive. He says this is to show that they're capable to lead the country. It tells you how far the US has come. 2 white men, both more than 75 years of age, threatening to battle it out in a golf course. Sounds like a dark comedy, but it is a reality of America right now. For our next story, let's talk about what goes on at the heart of the Earth. I'm talking about the Earth's inner core. It is a huge metal ball. It is made up mainly of iron, and it gets hot, anywhere between 5,000 to 6,000 degrees Celsius. What makes this core fascinating is that it spins. Think of it as one spinning top, that is the core, inside another bigger spinning top, that is the Earth. But the two do not spin together. In fact, according to a recent study, the Earth's inner core is spinning in reverse. What does this mean for us? Here's a report.
The Earth seems to have had a change of heart. We're talking about the Earth's core, the innermost part of the planet. Its spin has changed dramatically in recent years. According to a recent study, the Earth's inner core temporarily stopped rotating and then changed its direction. It's now going in reverse. This might sound bizarre and it invites a number of questions. Does this mean the Earth is also going in reverse? Is this apocalyptic? Well, not at all. But before we explain what this means for us, let's go back to Science 101. The Earth is made up of a lot of layers, and it's a volatile planet. The topmost layer is the crust. It's ever shifting. Then we have the mantle. This is where behemoth masses of rock flow. Go deeper and you will reach the core. This has two levels. The outer core, which is liquid, it holds molten metals that create currents. They conjure the Earth's magnetic field. So this layer is important. Go even deeper and you will find the inner core. This is a solid metal ball, about 70% as wide as the moon, and it rotates much like our planet. But here's the catch. The inner core rotates independently of our spinning planet, kind of like a spinning top inside an even bigger spinning top. And the two don't always cooperate. The Earth spins roughly 360 degrees in a day. That's how it completes a single day. But the inner core rotates about 1 degree faster than the Earth every year. So this causes time differences. Of course, 1 degree per year is not a lot. It's imperceptible to Earthlings, but scientists can track and measure the difference. When the core spins slowly, the liquid around it speeds up, so the Earth rotates faster. This shortens the length of a day, but the changes translate to merely thousandths of a second in a day. That may sound anticlimactic, but it's intriguing to researchers, especially since the inner core is a relatively newfound discovery. It was discovered by Danish seismologist Inge Lehmann in 1936. The question remains, why is the core going in reverse? Scientists are not sure, but according to the study, this could be part of a 70-year-long cycle of the core's movements, which sees changes due to the magnetic field. So the reversal in the spin can be part of the core's nature. Even though the core is at the heart of much of what happens on Earth, from volcanic eruptions to earthquakes, we don't know much about it. It is the Earth's deep interior, so it's impossible to observe or sample directly. While there are still several unanswered questions, this study does bring us one step closer to understanding the center of the Earth.
Before our next story, let me ask you something. It's a new week. How did it start for you? Did you experience the magic of time travel again? Let's do a quick flashback. It is Monday morning. You open your eyes. First thing you reach for is your phone. You check the news or social media. It's a stream of bad news, basically, barring the interruptions of cat videos, of course. There are words, images, videos, all coming at you at breakneck speed. And in what seems like minutes, hours have gone by. Be honest, did we get it right? And do not worry, we're not stalking you. This experience is so common, there is a term for it. It's called doom scrolling or mindlessly scrolling through the phone. The term first caught on during the pandemic, but if data is to be believed, we're all doom scrollers now. According to global research, we spend 6 hours and 35 minutes on our phone every day. 6 hours, 35 minutes every day, and much of it is devoted to doom scrolling. That is the average. Let me repeat it. 6 hours, 35 minutes, which is about 46 hours a week, 184 hours a month. But let's say you're not one of those. You spend lesser time on your phone, like half an hour per day. That is still 15 hours a month. And this is not good news. Doom scrolling comes with downsides, like greater levels of stress, anxiety, orthopedic problems like neck pain and smartphone thumb. Also poor sleep. Excessive phone usage before bed keeps the brain awake for longer. It hinders restorative sleep. So the body takes longer to wind down. It does not get the rest that it needs. And this explains why anxiety in the morning is a shared experience. It's kind of like a stress hangover. And reports say that it saw a 247% increase in online searches between 2022 and 2023. 247% increase. I know it's only Monday, but there is more. Doom scrolling also increases the risk of vicarious trauma. This is second-hand trauma. According to experts, when you do not experience a distressing event yourself, you're not directly impacted by it. But if you're repeatedly exposed to stories about it, it hurts your mental health. I'll give you an example. Do you remember the 9/11 attacks in the US? 2 planes slammed into the World Trade Center. The images were horrific. More than 2 billion people watched this attack on TV. Were you one of the viewers? Can you still see the images in your mind? If yes, you're not alone. More than 2 decades have passed. 2 billion viewers did not experience that attack. Yet many of those who watched this broadcast over and over and over again developed post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. They still get flashbacks. Some of them even get nightmares. And this was in the age of television. Cut to today, the age of smartphones. Our exposure to stressful events has never been more intense. There are wars, protests, floods, wildfires, viral outbreaks. We are exposed to apocalyptic updates constantly, which does make us more informed, but overexposure can also be bad for us. So what can we do? How can we reclaim our brain? Unfortunately, there's no quick fix because each digital addict is different. But there are plenty of solutions that all of us can try. Those who choose to go cold turkey opt for dumb phones or delete their social media, which is a big move. But those who believe in moderation could take smaller steps like setting time limits on their phones or apps, minimizing app notifications, or redesigning routines, like no phones in bed. There are a lot of ways to say no to the digital candy that is dispensed. But the first step is this: accepting that our doom scroll may lead us to a doom spiral. And finally, we want to talk about the climate crisis, which is no longer a distant threat. It is our reality, and it is happening right now. There's record-breaking drought in Africa and parts of Asia like China. There are floods ravaging Europe and heat waves sweeping through the US and until recently India. The climate crisis needs urgent intervention. We often focus on policy solutions, but there are also personal efforts that can help. Something as simple as planting a tree. It may appear like a small move, but it can be powerful. And we hope to mobilize people across the world to do this through the One Tree Project. It's an initiative of Network 18, the largest news network in India. Our final report tonight explains how one tree can make a world of difference.
Record-breaking drought in China. Longest ever heat wave in India. Raging wildfires in Australia. Flash floods in Europe. Rapidly melting glaciers. Bigger storms, fiercer cyclones, and widespread destruction. Multiple problems are wreaking havoc across the planet. And there's just one reason: climate change, which is no longer a distant threat. It's a global emergency where we are both the victims and the culprits. For centuries, human activities have exploited the planet's resources and pushed the Earth to the brink. Burning of fossil fuels, wiping out forests, industrial waste, these have all influenced the climate and the planet's temperature, adding huge amounts of greenhouse gases to those naturally occurring in the atmosphere and increasing the greenhouse effect and global warming. Our actions have painted a grim picture for the future. According to the World Health Organization, 3.6 billion people are already living in areas around the world that are highly susceptible to climate change. Every year, environmental factors take the lives of around 13 million people. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause about 250,000 additional deaths annually. When it comes to animal and plant species, over 1/3 of them are projected to go extinct by 2050. Today, as we stand in the age of global boiling, it has become imperative for each one of us to compensate for the damage to this planet. And here's how you can do that. You need not become a climate activist. One simple step by each one of us can make this world a better place and help the planet sustain life. You can just start by planting a tree. One single tree provides a day's oxygen for up to 4 people. Trees also absorb various toxins and pollutants and enhance soil strength. They also provide habitat for wildlife and support our well-being. And for people living in cities where air conditioners have almost become a necessity, trees can cool the temperatures by up to 10 degrees. Keeping all of these benefits in mind, News 18 Network, India's largest news network, has launched Project One Tree that aims to mobilize every Indian to plant a tree as a measure against climate change. The movement seeks to raise awareness about environmental conservation and foster collective action towards a greener and more sustainable future. Imagine the difference we can make with just a sapling. If each of us plants just one tree, it would lead to a significant reduction in carbon emissions and improve the health of our planet. Each tree that we plant today will serve as a beacon of hope for our future generations. So, plant a tree today and join the movement to save the earth.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 Network initiative.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Flooding and strong winds batter Texas as Hurricane Beryl hits the U.S. state. A meteor lights up the skies in Turkey, and ready, steady, slow. 150 snails battle it out in the Racing World Championship. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1497, Portuguese sailor Vasco da Gama set sail from Portugal in search of a sea passage to India. A year later, he landed on India's southern coast. While his goal was to buy Indian spices, his voyage triggered a chain of events, something that led to centuries of colonialism in India. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.